I hadn't heard of the term glitch or read any user stories when this occurred, but since then have listened to and read lots on YouTube and Reddit, so I decided to share my own. And this was so simple and mundane, but to me proves that glitches are real, and I believe anyone who says they have experienced them. This was around springtime of 2019. I made a note of it. I was sat in the living room on a Friday evening, watching TV. My then teen daughters had just gone to bed, as had my partner, who asked if I would bring a cup of tea up in the adverts, or when the TV program finished, and I also retired. I went into the kitchen, boiled the kettle, made a cup of tea, and then came back into the living room and put the cup of tea on the table next to me, intending to take it up to her, after I watched the current bit of program. At some point, I must have then dozed off into a fairly light sleep, as sometimes happens on a Friday evening after a week of work. Suddenly I was woken by a loud thud noise. I jolted awake and opened my eyes. In front of me, about 2 meters away and slightly off-center of the middle of the room, was a cup. It was an empty cup. Not one of the regular cups we have, but my partner's special, slightly larger cup she sometimes uses for different types of tea. It was bone dry, no liquid in it. The other cup of tea that I had made was still next to me, with the tea, now slightly cooler, still in it. I had not brought this other cup into the living room and put it into anything such as the sofa where it could have fallen off and made the noise. So, basically, this cup, which was kept in a cabinet in the kitchen next door, had jumped or materialized from the kitchen cupboard to this room and fallen onto the floor, waking me up. From the noise of the thud, I gathered that it had fallen at least handheld height, as if someone had carried it and let go of it. And no, it was impossible for my partner or the kids to have done this to play a prank, because the room door was shut, and it would be impossible to do this because of the layout of the room. Also, I checked shortly afterwards, and they were all in bed asleep. I took stock for a moment and deliberately took note of where I was sat and where the cup was and other things in the room, so I would not be confused and would remember how things were laid out in said room. Then, I got up and put the cup back in the cupboard in the kitchen, made a fresh cup of tea, and went up to bed. Nothing like this has happened before or since. I don't know what or if it actually meant anything in terms of the universe, like a sign to take the cup of tea up to my partner instead of watching the TV, or if it was just a glitch in how the universe works. Even though it was so simple, just an object jumping from one room to another, I am thankful to the universe in a way for letting me experience a true, verifiable glitch. The only thing I'm disappointed about is that I was not awake to see how the cup actually appeared when it did. I've always thought that there was more to the universe and existence than we think, and always believed in the supernatural, although I never had any explanation or proof for it. I think that what people term the supernatural could in fact be examples of, or related to, glitches like this that we notice. Who knows what the true nature and meaning of reality is? But these glitches suggest that there is more to it than we understand. When I was 22, 3 years ago, I was unable to sleep the night before a college final. It was a Sunday night, 10 p.m., and I set my alarm for 7 a.m. to go take my final at 8 a.m. the next day. It is worth noting that I regularly sleep through alarms, so I have an extra loud one at the foot of my bed, and that automatically stops after about 15 minutes of not being snoozed or turned off, which I then have a series of alarms I set on my phone just in case that doesn't wake me up. I'm a very heavy sleeper. I went to bed at 10 p.m., but a little after midnight, spending the whole time sweaty and unable to get comfortable and not being tired enough to fall asleep, I sat up in my bed and looked at my alarm clock, 12:16. I start to think about how much sleep I'm going to get at this point if I can fall asleep soon. I blink, and it's 3:27. Did my alarm clock glitch or something and wasn't telling the correct time? Did I fall asleep momentarily? I check my phone and the charger next to me, and it also says 3:27. So my alarm clock must be fine. It's at 100% charge now, so I take it off the charger and just set it back down. I look back at my alarm clock and think, what the hell? I blink again, 4:50. I'm in disbelief. My position hasn't changed. I've had an unbroken train of thought this entire time, and nothing has changed but the time. I blink again, 6:01. I blink again, 7 a.m. and my alarm is going off. My room is now bright, and I feel like the whole night passed. But I experienced only a minute of time passing, and never once lost actual consciousness that I'm aware of. I only blinked. Here's the wild, screwy part, though. I scooted to the end to turn off my alarm, grabbed my phone to look at it. It was completely dead. I plug it back in, waited a second, and then I turned it back on. It is now Wednesday morning. I've missed my final, and I can't account for the last 3 days. I have a bunch of texts from an angry girlfriend, emails from a concerned professor, the whole package. I cannot explain how this could have happened. It's difficult for me to fall asleep. It usually involves closing my eyes, waiting a long time of thinking and position changes, and then eventually I just wake up without remembering how I fell asleep. It was like I sat up in bed, slept away random intervals of time, without knowing that I'm falling asleep until eventually one of my alarms managed to wake me up days later. I wasn't hungry. My arms didn't hurt from sitting up in bed for literally days. I didn't need to use the restroom. It's by far the strangest thing that's ever happened to me. Has anyone else experienced something like this before? This happened over 10 years ago, but the details are very easy to remember. It's something that never made sense to me, but maybe there's an explanation to be found in this sub. I was a freshman in college playing soccer for the school's team. The beginning of the school year is the beginning of the soccer season, so we had morning practices and afternoon practices at this time. We had a fitness practice at 6:30 a.m. on this particular day. I'm one of those people that is never late to things. I'm very careful about alarms. I'm very careful to have good attendance. Missing a practice or being late was not something you wanted to do. The whole team would ridicule you and embarrass you. You would have to run laps or do stairs, and it's certainly not going to help you get playtime. I woke up this morning, close to 8, and slept all the way through practice, and looked at my roommates so as to say, "What happened? Did you turn my alarm off?" They all three said they don't remember any alarm. I'm practical. I know for a fact that I set my alarm because I simply remember doing it the night before. But I can easily accept the fact that I probably turned my alarm off in a drowsy stupor when it was going off. So I go about my day and must head to class, dreading a text from a coach or a captain. I go through my first class and haven't heard anything. Heading to my next class, I see one of the captains, a senior on the team. I'm kind of embarrassed to say something. He comes in to dap me up, and I say in my shame, "So how screwed am I that I missed practice this morning?" He looks at me and laughs, and then says, "Dude, I missed it too. I slept through my alarm somehow. Apparently, like 6 people didn't show up, which is kind of crazy, right? And they have another practice for us tomorrow morning. It's gonna suck. I left for class somewhat in shock. For me to miss a practice for sleeping in was basically something that never happens. But for 5 other people to miss the same practice is just so statistically and incredibly unlikely. The next day, I asked everyone why they missed, and they all had the same answer. They missed their alarm somehow. And not one person said their alarm was reset, like the power went out. People were still using physical alarm clocks at this time. The power going out could not have been the answer. We were all aware of how strange it was, but everyone just kind of laughed about it and moved on. The likeliest answer is an extreme coincidence, but maybe there's a different explanation. Who knows? Edit for reference. Sometimes someone would miss a practice, and in an extremely rare event, you might have seen 2 people miss a practice because they went out together drinking or something the night before. I work the night shift at a hospital. This had already been a strange week, where time just seemed to be off. I work in a very fast-paced environment, so 12-hour shifts go by in a heartbeat. On Tuesday, we had even more chaos than usual, because our phone system was acting up. It worked well enough that people could call, but they could not hear us. So people would call repeatedly and scream into our ears that our phones weren't working. And this went on the first 3 hours of my shift, with me and my coworker taking down numbers off the caller ID and calling people back on cell phones. At the end of that 3 hours, I really felt like I had been stuck in a time loop for several days. I even mentioned it to my coworker, but they didn't seem terribly concerned. On Thursday of the same week, I came home and went to bed as usual. I took my melatonin and put on a playlist of my favorite creepy stories on YouTube. I usually wake up at 5 p.m., so I have enough time to shower and make my commute to work. On this particular day, I woke up at 4:18 to use the bathroom. Well, I thought, better 40 more minutes to sleep than to wake up 10 minutes before the alarm. My stories were still playing. I went to the bathroom, and when I realized which story was playing, I thought, oh, this is a good one. I'm going to start it over. I went back to bed and quickly fell back asleep. I woke up again needing to use the restroom again. I looked at my phone, and it was 4:18. The story was at the same point that it was the first time that I woke up. Okay, I must have looked at my clock wrong the last time. Maybe it was 3:18. I look at the timer on this story, and it'll be an hour into it because it's at the same spot. Nope, it was 38 minutes in. There's no way that I could have confused 3:40 with 4:18. Also, my bladder isn't that small. My husband says that I dreamed the first potty break, but that would mean I dreamed something that happened in reality, almost exactly as it happened in my dream. Needless to say, I was not able to go back to sleep the second time, nor did I restart the story for fear of it recurring repeatedly. Furthermore, I would have had to have dreamed word for word a story that I had only heard one other time, while a different story was actually playing on my phone. Fortunately, I haven't experienced anything resembling time loops since that week, nor have I had any premonitions of bathroom trips. It's not an experience that I would recommend. I've been dying to post this story since it happened, but I had to wait to hit the karma requirement. I'm super excited to hear people's opinions on this. So, for context, at the time that the story occurred, I lived in a dorm at my college. I had one roommate and our door was always kept locked. On my desk, I had a jewelry holder that was a tray separated into 6 or so compartments. I kept a bunch of random stuff in it, but the object in question is a miniature screwdriver meant to tighten or loosen the screws that secure a bracelet that I wear. I rarely used this screwdriver. The bracelet is a pain in the ass to take off, but the tray was positioned by my bed in a way that the screwdriver was in my direct line of vision when I laid on my bed on my side. I made direct eye contact with it every night. I looked through the tray and it was nowhere to be found. I started getting kind of freaked out because I hate losing things, and there's no way that I had moved it since I last saw it. At this point, I asked my roommate to help me look because I figured I was just blind or something. She couldn't find it either. We then dumped the tray onto the floor and shuffled through everything just in case both of us had somehow missed it. After looking 3-4 times through the pile, I felt defeated, and I put the stuff back into the tray. I was standing by the tray and took one last look and did not see it, and my roommate walked out of the room first. I followed behind her, and she locked the door. In other words, she had the only other copy of our room key in her possession. I wore my key on a different bracelet, so I know I had mine on me too. A couple of hours later, we returned to the room. She unlocks the door and I walk over to my jewelry tray again, and lo and behold, the screwdriver is sitting in the exact spot it had always been, tucked in its little corner, like I hadn't dumped the tray on the ground a few hours earlier. I picked it up, and my roommate and I both started freaking out. We had both checked multiple times, and there was absolutely zero chance that we had just missed it. It's been a few years since this happened, and I still think about it. When I see my old roommate, we still talk about it. I just don't understand how it disappeared and reappeared in the same spot that it had been in. Further, no one, including my roommate, even knew about this screwdriver because it had no purpose except for tightening the screws on the specific bracelet that I would wear. Sorry this post is so long, but I wanted to be as detailed as possible. So, I am kind of reluctant to ask this question, but it's been a mystery that has baffled me for 13 years. So here I go. When I was 21 years old, I lived in my mom's guest house in her backyard. One night, we got into a horrible fight, one of the worst fights we've ever had. When she went back to her own side of the yard, I closed the doors to my guest house and I locked them, shut all the lights off, and laid down to go to sleep. About an hour later, I got a phone call from her and she asked me what I was doing. I told her I was sleeping. She said, "No, you're not." I said, "Yes, I am." She said, "Prove it then. Walk out the front door, come across the yard, and meet me in my kitchen, but stay on the phone with me." So that's what I did. When I walked into her house and into her kitchen, she was staring out her kitchen window across the yard at the side door of my guest house. She told me to come over to where she was standing and to look out the window and tell her what I saw. I looked out the window and I saw myself. It wasn't a current version of me, though. It was me my senior year of high school. I knew this because my hair was done the exact way that I used to do it back then. And I was wearing my favorite shirt and matching shoes that I used to have back then as well. I was sitting on a chair that I actually did have sitting outside the door of my house in the side yard. I was talking to people that were not there. We saw nobody else. And I was smoking a cigarette. I also used to smoke back then. I had my legs crossed and I was laughing and having a good time. I also kept looking over at the window where my mom and my actual self were staring inside her kitchen. I believe it was around 1 in the morning, so it was very dark out. Nobody could have seen us standing inside her house in the dark. So that too was very weird that version of me kept looking over at the window, almost as if she, or I, knew we were there. This has baffled my mom and I for a very long time. I've never been able to find anything on Google that is remotely close to what I'm talking about. The only thing that I've seen through research is information about doppelgangers. I know the difference. I'm aware of what a doppelganger is, and this was something entirely different from that. Can somebody else who is spiritual and enlightened please tell me what the hell that was? And thank you in advance. So, like the title says, people, mostly people I barely know but have told my name to before, like patients at my job, for example, always call me by the wrong first name. Every single time someone gets my name wrong accidentally, like we've all called someone by the wrong name by accident, but the name they always call me is always Jennifer. Now, I think everyone's first instinct here would be that it's just confirmation bias, and that I just only pay attention to it when the name they call me is Jennifer, and that I disregard the times they've called me by other names that isn't Jennifer. But I took this into account about 8 to 10 years ago, and started paying strict attention. I have never been called a wrong name that is not Jennifer in this time frame. To get some logical reasoning out of the way, my real name does not sound like Jennifer, nor does it start with a J or any other letter that could make the J sound in English, or any other language that I'm aware of. And this has happened in multiple different states, so that rules out that maybe there's just a girl who lives locally to me that's named Jennifer, and we just happen to look really alike. Strangers that I don't know at all don't come up to me on the street mistaking me for a different person. It's always people who I've told my real name to at some point. Hell, even people who have known me for a short while but long enough to know better, I'm talking over the course of several months, have called me Jennifer. The freaking priest that married my ex and I, who we had known for 1.5 years at that point, called me Jennifer when we got up to rehearsing the vow portion of the wedding ceremony on our rehearsal night, even though our names were written down in front of him. I freaked that he might do the same thing during the actual ceremony the next day, but he didn't. Yet he called my ex by his correct name. I do not believe that I look like any celebrity I know of named Jennifer. I've been told that I look like other celebrities, but never a Jennifer. I don't hang out with or work with anyone named Jennifer. Nobody I'm related to is named Jennifer. I've been called Jennifer by different people of different genders, races, different nationalities, different first languages spoken, and from different countries. My real name is a common one, so it's not hard to remember. The only thing that I'm left to deduce is that it's just a huge coincidence that's spanned at least a decade. So, Reddit, what do you make of this? This is very out of my comfort zone to be sharing anything about my life with people. I'm a very private person, but I've been so creeped out by something that happened to me last week. that I started researching Glitch in the Matrix stories to see if anyone had experienced anything like this. I work in an OB/GYN clinic as a medical assistant. Friday evening was like every other evening. It was nearing 5 o'clock when the front desk clerk, Brooke, walked by me with her parents' new Louis Vuitton purse across her shoulder. The purse caught my eye because it's not her usual red bag that I see her carrying every day. She waved and said, "See you Monday, and have a good weekend." I said, "You have a good weekend too. I like your new purse, by the way. I've always wanted a Louis Vuitton." She smiled, went out the front door, as I heard the doorbells jingle. I walked to the back exam room to finish disinfecting everything before I left. I got done with that, and on my way out the door to leave, I noticed Brooke sitting at her computer. I giggled and said, "You must have forgotten to finish up something." She looked back and said, "No, I'm just finishing up now. Have a nice weekend. See you Monday." I thought it was a little odd, but just let it go, thinking she had forgotten something. I got out to my car and couldn't find my keys, and I realized I left them in the office. As I was grabbing them off the desk, Brooke stood up to leave again, and started wrapping her old red bag across her shoulder. I laughed and said jokingly, "Are you carrying around 2 purses now?" She looked at me strange and said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, now that you have the new Louis Vuitton bag, I didn't expect you to be carrying the old one still." She looked at me strange again and then said, "I don't have a Louis Vuitton." I paused for a few seconds and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I must have been mistaken. Have a good evening." We left and went our separate ways. I just don't understand what happened. I have such a sick feeling in my stomach now while I'm at work, and I'm terrified of something like this happening again. So to start off, I live in Northern California, like 250 miles north of San Francisco. Anyway, my granddaughter needed to go to the dentist, and the closest pediatric dentist is 190 miles south of where I live. We decided to make a trip of it. My daughter, granddaughter, my best friend, and my boyfriend all went to spend the night in a motel, and we took her bright and early the next day. So we're on our way back going north on the 101 highway, and we all know there's a rest stop coming up. It's past Willits, but before Laytonville, and you can see it from the highway once you take the turn to go to the rest stop. You go over a small bridge and drive a bit back south to get to the rest stop. So we see the rest stop, and we see a blonde lady standing by a white car in the parking lot. So we take the exit, go over the bridge, drive south on this access road, and no one or nothing is there. No rest stop, no lady, no car. We were all confused. So we're like, okay, this is weird. So we get back on the highway going north again, and still just confused, and we don't know what to think. So we're driving along, and there is the lady again, and the rest stop, and the white car. How did this happen? There's no way this lady could have gotten ahead of us, and we all clearly saw everything exactly the same a few miles back. And it all vanished, and then all of a sudden, she's ahead of us. Same exact everything. We just don't know what to make of this. So this was this week's Glitch in the Matrix collection. A collection of stories that will make you reconsider your perspective of reality. Will make you think that maybe what we see isn't all there is. Maybe there's something more than this. In a non-afterlife sense, maybe maybe existence is just a very confusing and very glitchy thing. And hopefully you enjoyed this collection. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button and also subscribe to the channel if you're new. That'd be greatly appreciated. You can also go to Patreon or hit the join button for 99 cents a month, get early access if you want. Never expected, always appreciated. I do apologize for my voice. It is scratchy again, or still scratchy. I don't know what's going on with this. It definitely feels like the lingering effects of whatever the heck it was I had, so it sucks, but it is what it is. Anyways, finally, we can move on to this week's word of the week. Last week's word was flare, and several of you put comments. Not as many as the week before, but that is totally fine. It was a harder word to use, less commonly used word, and maybe just several of you didn't feel like commenting, and that's totally fine. On the screen now and several seconds prior to this has been the comments that were left for me with the word of the week, and a huge thank you to each and every single one of you for leaving your comment. Now this week, the word of the week is goal. G-O-A-L. As in goal, if you're a soccer football fan or whatever that is. Yeah, anyways, sorry, I'm not a sports person. Anyways, the definition of goal is the object toward which an endeavor is directed, an end, or a noun or noun phrase referring to the place to which something moves. And also, success, because that's the goal, right? We all want to make it. So, leave me a comment using your word goal, and I will put your comment in the end of next week's Glitch in the Matrix video. But, of course, until then, my friends, I hope that you sleep well.